And the gang is back. Before the break, we were talking about corruption and all the different issues about lifestyle audit. But there is something else that came up, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to play a soundbite in a short while. But the Deputy President said something interesting that perhaps we all know, that corruption has nothing to do with elections in this country. Were you surprised?
Yes and no.
That's not an election issue in 2022 at all, in his estimation.
I would give a yes and no answer. Yes and no, why? Because at this point in time, you walk around the country, you will hear sentiments that people are getting concerned about the amount of money that is reported, stolen, looted, or lost. Maybe the numbers may not be adding up. Maybe the figures that are coming from the DCI may not be adding up in terms of the people who are being taken to court, how much money they're being charged with. Because every so often you'll hear 20 billion, and then when people are taken to court, it's a few hundreds millions. Or you'll hear people it's being said that a certain amount of money has been lost, but when people are taken to court, it's way less than that.
But has anyone ever lost an election in this country because people thought he or she was corrupt?
And that is the reason why I'm saying it may be an election issue, it may not be an election issue. Because on one hand, the concerns that Kenyans are getting and relating lack of services to the alleged corruption is very pertinent. But now the question is, when that day comes, will people consider the leaders that they are told are corrupt? Will they consider them for election to high offices? Yes or no? The problem is, unfortunately, people listen to many things, and many things influence how people vote. Corruption may be a discussion there, but whether it will be an election issue...
But can finance elections.
In 1997... Yeah, because that's what I was going to add, that corruption does finance elections, but also it is in the interest of the Deputy President to steer the conversation of corruptions in 2022 elections as far away from himself as possible. Not saying that he is guilty, however, you do know there's a lot of, rumor and rhetoric about
perception.
And
he did talk about it. Can we just get that soundbite?
Okay.
Where the Deputy President was saying it is all politics targeting me, excuse me. Can we, we can just have that soundbite now.
And now the person on the dock is William Ruto.
So you're actually confirming again that you're a target?
This is politics. This is what we are used to. We are used to all these claims being made for political expediency by our competitors.
So let me just finish. Because there's been the perception about corruption and the Deputy President, I'm not surprised with the statement that corruption will not be a factor in 2022, because he's trying to steer clear of that. That, listen, despite the perception around me being corrupt, that this will not be something that influences the election. So that is a statement that would actually be in his favor. It understood politically.
And he says it's targeted, actually.
Yes, it is, and I agree with you, it is a political wish. It would work very well for him if corruption is not on the ballot. But in 1997, President Daniel Arap Moi was facing a divided opposition. And I remember there were two different kind of arguments. The opposition and Michael Kijana Wamalwa, a very eloquent politician, who was running for president on a Ford Kenya ticket, basically anchored his campaign on anti-corruption, talking very eloquently about the Golden Bag scandal that had happened 5 years earlier, between 92 and 95. So he ran his campaign on that, saying that, and I remember him giving an example that if you are given 5 billion shillings, that was the amount in question at the time, between 5 and 13.5 billion shillings were in question. He was telling a rally in Uhuru Park that if you are given 5 billion shillings rather, in cash, in coins, you will walk dropping a coin all the way to where he comes from, which is Kwanza in Kitale or Cherangani.
I wonder what he would say now, because 5 billion is small change.
Yes. Now, Moi, a very smart politician when it comes to how to segment the voting blocks, concentrated on the rural vote, because corruption did not resonate with the rural masses.
True.
They don't know about pay as you earn. They don't have pay slips. So that question also, I'm sure, is some of what that plays around in the strategic minds around Deputy President William Ruto. How many people really think corruption is an issue? The people who think corruption is an issue are people who actually physically feel the pinch of paying taxes, especially directly. You go to your payslip and see
30% is gone.
Yes.
30%, and you've not handed it directly to Aurora and Kimoret Dam. It's gone to the taxpayer, the tax collector. So,
but those also would have to be people who are able to link their problems and corruption. Because there are people also who have problems, but they are unable to make the connection or unwilling.
Issue. How many are they? Will they
even
outnumber those who don't think corruption is a question?
Jamila, quickly, because we need to go to the handshake.
I look at it in terms
and those
of
4 phone calls before
I look at it in terms of where we are right now. This is 2019. Elections, I know about 3 or so years. Ukumbali. I don't know if Kenyans have short memories or long ones. I don't know if they'll remember now that this corruption thing, like a particular candidate was, in this instance, the DP is being labeled as corrupt, will it still be in their heads between now and 2022 when we have the elections? And as you said, it has to be something that they feel. I don't know if we can say that the fact that because so much of money is being stolen, we hear about billions all the time, it's no longer millions. Hata ulikuwa tunasema mtu akiiba millions ni kama hajaiba, lazima ibe billions unakuwa ameiba. Is it not getting to the people in terms of nurses in my local hospital are striking because hakuna pesa za kuwalipa, or my county is unable to do any development projects because there's no money for development. The money that is available is just kulipa mishahara and all that. Maybe it is getting to them. What you said is they may not be able to relate that to looting of funds, but I think it's still a bit too early for us to say corruption will be an issue.
Remember also,
let me quickly add something. When you go to the politics proper during an electioneering period, you will be vying against leaners, and you will come and tell people very nice things, what you're going to do, policies and everything else, a manifesto, nice things, and tell them how clean you are and how dirty your opponent is. But at the end of the day, they'll ask you, sasa, unatuacha aje?
Unatuachia nini?
Yes. And then leaners will come. He will not say very many things. He will tell the electorate, Joe was here, akawambia story mingi kunihusu, lakini yeye hawasaidi. So mimi, pangeni line, cha. At the end of the day, those are the corruption that we are talking about as a country will be financing the elections.
There is an illustration
some people who will necessarily do not deserve to be in positions of high office or positions of leadership will easily end up in positions of leadership in the counties, in parliament.
But at the national level, our person, our man, our son is more important than all those.
There are more factors that will be there than corruption.
Very quickly.
Okay.
Adam Duko says, in Kenya, if you want to be elected, you must be financially okay. And the more money you have, the more chances you will have into an elective position.
Okay.
That is a fact.
That is a good way to wrap up this conversation and move to the handshake. And let's have the soundbite where the Deputy President was giving what is his version of what happened just before we saw that handshake on the steps of Harambee House. So we're going to listen to the soundbite right now about the handshake, where the Deputy President was saying that he was actually called by Raila Odinga before this.
Yeah.
Before Raila Odinga engaged the President on the matter of the handshake, he engaged me.
Okay.
Raila Odinga approached me on 4 occasions.
Before talking to the President?
Yes.
After the election?
After the election, to have a discussion. I declined.
And I declined. Why is this important, Linus? Why now?
First of all, there is the whole question of what really transpired. Who called who? Who did what first? But of note is the fact that the Deputy President statement or allegation is a whole 1 year late. The handshake happened on the 9th of March, 2018. And he has said so many other things about the handshake. His lieutenants have said so many other things about the handshake that it becomes very curious that a year later, he comes and says, I actually was called and contacted 4 times by Raila Odinga. The truth lies between them, if they actually did that. But to me, the period between March 2018 and 2019, waiting a whole year, sufficient ground for doubt on the accuracy of that.
But it has got quite some response, and we are talking about it.
Yeah. I'm not sure that I buy into this whole idea, because it's clearly a he said, she said. This was him muddying the waters. And I'm in a WhatsApp group, and as he made that statement, someone in the group said, this will be the headline tomorrow. In fact, he predicted that the Star newspaper would pick it up, and they did. So that the outtake of that conversation, even the fact that he was pinned by Hussein to talk about the source of his wealth, that this became, because there is absolutely no way we can prove this allegation. Raila will say, I didn't call. Yeah. He will say, I did. Then we heard Raila Jr. coming in to say, no, in fact, he offered my sister and I jobs. It's all between two people. It almost sounds like a lover's spat that you do not want to be involved in, because you just never know the truth. By the way, I'm not falling for this bait, because that's exactly what it is, and it's just a red herring, and now we're just talking about it, when I'm not sure the sort of value it adds, other than to really off the table.
There's a third person now. There's a third person in this equation. That's the president, Uhuru Kenyatta. Yeah. Because of course there's him and Raila, who actually had the handshake, and then there's now Ruto, of course, saying that he was involved. Maybe we need to wait to see what Uhuru Kenyatta has to say, because now we are he said about it. But I remember one time when Raila spoke about it, about the handshake in an interview, and he said, it was because of the state of the nation at that time. Remember the polarization, the fact that amekuwa amejiswear in, because one section of the country had completely mejigawa kabisa. They were actually, the country was totally divided. And it brings me to the whole issue of what the president said recently. He said, what am I supposed to do not to jaribu kusikizana na the 48% of this population that did not vote for me? So for him, the importance of the handshake cannot be underestimated.
But yet the deputy president said, Francis, that he was not for this thing. He opposed it. He refused when Raila approached him 4 times. He told the president about his misapprehensions regarding this thing that the president was thinking about. And to date, 1 year later, he actually remains opposed to what the handshake represented back then and what it represents now. In a sense, he was saying, well, you know what, my fears have been borne out.
The handshake was always going to be uncomfortable for the deputy president. You see, in this arrangement where you have 2 people and you're working, and all of a sudden somebody else has to come in, and you have to make a little space for the person who is coming into the relationship, there is a question, there is some discomfort. Up and until the March 9th handshake, probably the succession equation in Jubilee was crystal clear. Probably
fanya kumi ni fanya kumi.
But when the handshake happened, a few things changed. The political environment changed totally. In fact, you would say the beginning of a new political realignment came up on the March 9th during the handshake. So there is always going to be some discomfort from the deputy president about the handshake. And the handshake has also introduced a new dimension of politics. You see, initially, a few things were not going to happen because it was an us versus them. So that has been dealt with to some extent by the handshake. In fact, the us versus them equation has now gone into Jubilee itself. That's why you have Kieleweke and Tanga. Every Sunday, members of the same family, the Jubilee party, are at each other's necks. Every Sunday, one team saying this and the other team saying this. So the handshake was always going to bring some discomfort. And probably it should also give us an insight into a few things that are likely to happen as we move forward. You will see a few realignments. Some people who are allies will be rivals, and guys who are rivals will be allies. Bearing in mind that there will be no incumbent in 2022, then introduces a whole dimension about
but
the
interesting,
politics of succession.
interesting, Jamila, that he should say this.
Yes.
That he is not for the handshake, essentially, in the manner that it is right now. He's essentially saying that he suspected from the word go that this thing was ill-intentioned, and that 1 year later his fears have been born. But this coming just a week after the president himself said there was no turning back on the handshake. Interesting dynamics there, considering that they are in this thing that we like to call the presidency together.
Exactly, because we said it after the 2010 elections, alichaguliwa na rais, walikuja kama pamoja, they were a pair. But I think, I don't know if I'm correct in saying this, I think currently when you sit and ask as many people as you can about who they see to be running in the presidential election come 2022, most people will say ni Raila na Ruto ambao watasimama pamoja. So that in itself, and I think when he looks at the fact that squeeze hata Raila, he even receives ambassadors. Ama anawaaga. I think he did that with the South African ambassador when he was leaving.
Then President Tshisekedi.
Yes, and he's totally involved. In fact, I remember during the State of the Nation address, when he arrived in Parliament, he had this entourage. Watu wengine walikuwa wanashukia kule nje wanatembea wakiingia ndani. Yeye alishukishwa. So it's like things have changed. When you compare March last year, let's not even March, 20 January, February, the situation how it was, especially with how Raila Odinga was being treated in this country. I don't think any politician or anyone wanted to be seen at a photographed by him, with him. But sasa, after the handshake, my brother, ndugu yangu mkubwa, that is the tune that has been playing all through. And I think to some extent, of course, Ruto, I don't know if he's worried about whether at some point the president will say, mimi naunga mkono.
Interesting dynamics.
Yeah. Joe, there are two observations I would like to make about the handshake. It has introduced changes in the following ways. The first one is to basically replay what we saw in this country during the Grand Coalition era. The only player that has changed is there are two players that have changed. Instead of Mwai Kibaki, we have Uhuru Kenyatta. And instead of Kalonzo Musyoka, we have William Ruto. Raila comes in.
And instead of Raila, we have Raila.
And instead of Raila, we have Raila. And he comes in, but to an arrangement that is different from what it was in the Grand Coalition. In the Grand Coalition, he wasn't this well treated. He was put on check by Francis Mudaura and by the machinery basically kept him in a certain place.
And
there was
things like that.
Things like that. And there was even a time in the National Assembly, they were fighting on who should speak on behalf of the government. Now, Raila comes in this time without the title, but with what did you call all that?
The trappings, yeah.
The trappings are there. He's enjoying a certain closeness to power. I sat in the anti-corruption conference in Bomas of Kenya, and you know, it was interesting to just observe the body language throughout. President Kenyatta seated in the middle, to his left, Raila Odinga, to his right, William Ruto, and each, you know, trying to converse with him. This is power. This is how it is played. So that has complicated matters in one way. The second factor I want to point out is William Ruto is firmly setting his eyes on 2022. And he looks at Raila as a potential threat. And this potential threat is working with my boss. So this is something to take care of politically. Cause as much discomfort as possible around that relationship. Just so that they don't both arrive on the line of the Jubilee nominations as favorites. Because right now we should assume they're in the same political house.
But Joe, what if William Ruto was correct that he was called by Raila Odinga? We've not had the former Prime Minister speak about this question, and everybody is eagerly waiting to hear what he will say about this. Probably he will. Most definitely he will. You saw the statement coming from the ODM Secretary General. Very tough statement. In fact, I quote what Sifuna said, that for Raila Odinga, even if William Ruto was the only remaining human being on earth, Raila Odinga would rather cut a deal with trees and birds. It shows you how serious that statement is. But this also introduces us to a bigger discussion. The content of the handshake. What really was the content of the handshake? beside the 9-point agenda that we were told about.
I think
and that is a question that probably the president needs to one day come clearly and say, this is what happened.
And probably we'll never know, but I think we
Does it matter though?
We need to move. Yeah, we need to. I mean, like, but I think we need to.
We can't exhaust the 4 calls and the 9 points
in one night. No.
But then
we need 4 nights and 9 days. So
yes, but we will only need 1 day to discuss what happened, especially in relation to the upcoming by-elections in Wajir South. And probably not even 1 day, maybe a few minutes.